What are some of the reasons you think we haven't seen UAP disclosure, right? Well, ex-CIA officer Jim Semivan recently gave his comments about that on a recent episode of Engaging the Phenomena. It's a phenomenal interview. I'll put a link in the description. Please go check out the full 3-hour interview. In this video, I'm going to cover 3 clips from the interview to kind of give you a taste of what's in there. And mainly his response to why we don't have disclosure, right? A lot of people blame the government. They blame this. They blame that. Listen to what he has to say of who he blames, right? The phenomena itself. And you can hear the reasons behind it. I'm also going to cover a particular interesting part of his own experience that he's had at the very end of this video. So stay tuned for that. It's very, very interesting. It's kind of like I would say a hidden bombshell here at the end, if you ask me. Something I never heard of. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, y'all, and you like content like this, please hit that subscribe button. I put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day, y'all. And please hit that like button, vetters. That really helps out the video. So thank y'all so much for the support there. And, of course, comment down below. What do you think about Jim Semivan's comments about blaming the phenomena for the reason we don't have disclosure? All right, let's jump in. Here we go. Before we get to that, I want to let James and Jim sort of explain, well, Jim's background, right? Who he is. Give you a little more information if you're a little unfamiliar about him. All right, here we go.
Jim retired in 2007 after a 25-year career in the Central Intelligence Agency's National Clandestine Service. At the time of his retirement, he was a member of the CIA's Senior Intelligence Service. Jim served multiple overseas and domestic tours along with senior management positions in CIA headquarters. He is a recipient of the agency's Career Intelligence Medal. And nowadays, people are going to be familiar with Jim regarding To the Stars, as Jim is the co-founder of To the Stars and the vice president of operations. So anything you want to add to that impressive resume?
That describes me pretty much.
I don't know.
I did work for the intelligence community writ large for about 12 years after I retired, though, as a consultant, independent consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, there you go. It's a little more backstory on who Jim Semivan is, right? And To the Stars Academy, that's famously started with Tom DeLonge, right? Singer of Blink-182. I'm sure most of you know, but some of you may not. All right, next clip I'm going to show you is, before we get to the main clip here, this next clip I'm going to show you is Jim basically explaining what he thinks the basic UFO story is, right? Because when you hear that, you go, oh, well, what is the basic UFO story? And might I add, James right here, Iandoli on the right, in the middle here, right, to my right here, this guy. Great interviewer. Really, every time I see more of his interviews, he asks some really, really great questions. I've had him on the show here. Phenomenal interview as well, because he's had his own experience. But, yeah, he's a great interviewer. But right here, he asks Jim, what does he think the basic UFO story is? And it's honestly quite interesting to get that, because this is then understood as just, well, that's the truth, right? This is the basic. I mean, we know this stuff. It's like, well, wait, how do we, So it's interesting to hear this. So, all right, here we go.
Public. So you always are very, very careful who you discuss and what you discuss. And I'm sure some presidents were even told, the basic story, but weren't told everything.
What do you think the basic story is? That there's basic another intelligence?
Yeah. I mean, it's very basic. It's another intelligence. We met them. We don't know much about them. We have craft. They're located here. These are some of the organizations that are working on it. This is the main organization. These are defense contractors that are dealing with it. And it goes just about that far.
When you said we met them, is it like, is that
Was that
You said we met them. Is that like the Holloman Air Force landing event?
similar to that? Yeah, probably.
Do you think there was a meeting like that?
I think there was.
Yeah.
I'm speaking hypothetically.
Yeah. And hypothetically, what is that like how an agreement or an arrangement would be met?
I would assume that's the case.
Yeah.
Great questions, James. Great follow-up questions. Interesting answers, I got to admit. So I guess we're just led to believe that, all that's true, right? Because getting to my bigger point here, you'll see why this matters, right? So the idea that we have an agreement with them, we've met, we've spoken with them, we've communicated, we have craft of theirs, they exist, they're here. Okay. So, all right, it's a lot, just a lot, right? I don't know. Again, there's no, what is the evidence of that? What is the evidence of that basic story and that it's been told to all the presidents, he thinks, right? So they would have landed in a craft. We met with them and spoke with them. Is interesting. All right, let's hear the reason why Jim thinks we, again, don't have disclosure, right? Meaning that basic UFO story then gets told to the public, right? This basic disclosure of that basic story, right? That gets told to the public. Why don't we have that? What's in the way of that basic story coming out, right? Most people blame our government, right? The United States government and many governments wherever you live, right? Defense contractors, right? Private aerospace companies, right? Just bad apples within the government, right? The secret cabal of people running things. Many reasons given why we don't have disclosure. The world's not ready for it. Ontological shock, right? But Jim's reason is one I've thought of myself, if I'm being honest, right? Let's hear it. And then we'll discuss.
That's the discussion, is that the government may be being prevented from discussing this, or being told not to do that. One of the things I brought up before, I was on a podcast not too long ago. I think I went to the Stars podcast, and I said, well, what if the phenomena? The phenomena doesn't do anything, right? It just shows itself whenever the hell it wants to. It's completely unpredictable. It tells you what it tells you, doesn't give you any proof of anything. It teases you, it cajoles you, it scares you, it terrifies you, but you can't bring it home to meet the parents, right? It's not something where they do the formal handshake. It's not landing anywhere and saying, "Hey, I'm Klaatu, right? And I'm here to, send you a message, right?" They're not doing that. It's not doing that, and you have to ask yourself, why isn't that happening?
Well, Jim just said the basic UFO story is that did happen. They did land and say, I'm Klaatu or whatever, and meet with us and make an agreement, right? They've met with us. He literally said that happened. And now here he's saying that doesn't happen. That's not what's happening. I don't know. Am I reading that wrong? Sounds, it's a contradiction there. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
And if so people get mad at the government, and they say, well, the government should be letting all this information out. Well, shit, blame the phenomenon. That's what I'm doing. More so than the government. That's the one that's not sharing. And does it have a good reason? Does it even deal with reason? Is reasoning even a part of its existence? We don't know. We have no idea. They could be so far advanced that they look at us as microbes, and, well, okay, here's a development of a microbe, that we developed years and years ago. do we give it another level of consciousness? Do we go from having a basic consciousness like an animal to self-consciousness, which we have now? Do we bring it into a form of cosmic consciousness, like William Buck talked about around the turn of the last century? Do we bring them into that, and are we ready? And maybe your experience, my experience, and this whole conversation about that is a preliminary, for that to be happening down the road.
So, okay, some interesting things there. And look, I respect Jim for talking about this, and honestly, I would love to have my own conversation with them, right? If they view us as microbes, how do they know to meet with our leadership? Does that make sense? The people in the government, like, how do they know to even believe us and what we say, right? And how do we even have an agreement with them if we don't even know if they reason? Does that make sense? How can they even come to an agreement? Right? We would assume that if they came to an agreement that they then reason. Right? So I guess just some confusing things. And my point is, what is actually known to be true? Because even though he says, well, they did, the basic story is this. Yeah, but then nothing then matches up with that basic story. So what is... We're still left going, well, I don't know, and speculate. And I get that. But I don't know. I guess I'm just confused trying to figure out that basic story. Hang on, yo. All right, guys, I apologize for that. Yes, my dogs are barking. That's real life. That's just a reminder, y'all, that I'm just a regular dude here looking into this stuff. So just to remember, my opinion is just as valid as yours. So I look forward to the comments of, what we're talking about here. So anyway, getting back to it, Jim Semivan here, right, being interviewed by James, blaming the phenomena for the reason we don't have disclosure, right? So what do you think of his comments, the reasons why, some of the points I brought up? I don't know. Again, I'm just asking questions here. All right, look, let's move to the last clip where Jim is going to talk about his own experience, all right, with the phenomena. Which is fascinating, but more fascinating is kind of, well, I don't want to spoil it. Let's see if you hear it, and then we'll talk about it. Again, links in the description if you want to go check all this out without my commentary. All right, let's go.
Would you mind giving any kind of description or anything regarding your experience?
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail. And first, let me just say that, and I thank you for calling it an experience. Some people will say, like, would call it an abduction experience. I don't like or dislike that term. I think anybody wants to use a term they want to use, to describe their experience. But I call mine an experience because I don't know to this day what it meant. I only know that it was real, and it involved my wife and I. It was classic. You go to bed at night, and all of a sudden, you're being visited, and I won't get into specifics, like I said, not now, but the after effects. My wife had some serious issues after it happened. I had some physical marks on my body, and I actually have proof of them. But it was one of those things. And then it's continued on, up for about a year or two afterwards. We also had a lot of poltergeist activity going on at the place we were living. We lived in Virginia, in Alexandria, Virginia, but we lived in a neighborhood that was an old Civil War encampment, and before that, it was a Native American encampment, and so we're not quite sure everything that was going on there, but it was interesting, and it wasn't until gosh, 2013, 2014 that, and we had what Robert Hastings, the guy who wrote UFOs and Nukes. Robert's a great guy, and he calls it the meh response, right? You have this thing happen to you, and it just really alters everything. And then it's sort of like, you're involved in it, and you're really wild about it for like a day or two. Then you go, meh, like, what are you going to do with it? Where do you put it? And you know, who do you talk to? But it wasn't until 2014 when I ran into John Alexander at a conference. Didn't have anything to do with UFOs or anything like that, but I ran into him, and he interviewed my wife and I, and then they got in touch with Lou's program and some other people, and next thing you know, we became heavily involved in this, and our blood was taken, medical records, DNA, and everything like that, and we're still part of this cohort group that's being studied. So
what? Cohort group that's being studied? So there's a group of experiencers, abductees, whatever, term you want to use. He wants to use experiencer for himself, right? That are being studied privately, secretly, right? Their DNA, medical records, blood work is being taken. I've never heard of this. Has anyone heard of this little group? And who else is part of this group that's being studied? And what are those results going to be released? Like, I guess I'm just confused on what this means. Can other people sort of apply to be studied? Just regular folks who haven't been in the CIA? I don't know. Just curious. But this is interesting, if you ask me. I don't know. A secret UFO study group, right? Studying experiencers and really, getting their, private medical records, blood work, DNA. I don't know. What are they doing with it? What does it mean? Was it just part of a normal investigation? Because he says many things there, right? Lou's group. So he's talking about ATIP, I would imagine. And then from there, who, what? Let's continue the clip a little bit, and then, we'll go out on this.
And that's pretty much what I'll go into with that. Eventually, all of it will come out, I'm sure, somewhere down the road. But
I hope so. I think I do think there, in some regards, there's power to sharing your experience, especially from somebody like you, who is a senior intelligence official or officer. But just one more question about that, and
sure.
then we're going to move on. Were there different types of entities?
Yeah, they weren't grays. Let's put it that way. I didn't know what they were. I mean, I can describe them. I'm not going to describe them, but when I did describe them to certain people, I better not name them because they may not want to be named. But it was at CIA headquarters, and I was asked to, get a conference room for about, around 6-7 hours. I thought that was unusual, and I didn't know the people who were coming, and but they had as many clearances as I had, and they had a no escort badge, so that's highly unusual. So they came in. I met them at the door of the agency, and we walked into a conference room, and we stayed there for like 6-7 hours, and they proceeded to scare the living hell out of me, and they did. It altered my life completely. But it wasn't then, it was then, I described to them in much more detail, and then one of them basically said, "Oh, you ran into and then he gave me the name, and I had never heard of that before, because in the intervening years, this happened around 93, maybe 92, 93. But intervening years between then and 2014, I think is when this happened. In between those years, I had read quite a bit about UAP and UFO and experiences and contact experiences. So I was familiar with the literature, but I was not familiar with this particular piece of information that was divulged. And some of it was unclassified, but some of it, the bulk of it, was classified enough that I can't really discuss it with you here. And it was then that I got to meet Lou Elizondo when he was running ATIP, and I sort of was a little bit of an unofficial consultant for the ATIP program there for about a couple of years. And they would show me things, and and there are other things that we were trying to work on for the government, particularly for the Navy in this particular respect. So,
and you mentioned that, well, was it at that point that you got some kind of read-in?
Some kind of, I'm sorry, what?
Like read into any kind of this information? Or
yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't read into. It was. I don't want to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was read into the reality of the phenomenon itself. I mean, it's one thing when you read a book and people are talking about it, and it's one thing when you have an experience and the experience was not. My wife's a clinical psychologist, so I know the difference between what a numinous state is and what twilight is and vivid dreaming and all this kind of stuff, and riding the mare, as I used to say. This wasn't that. It was totally different. And if you speak to people that have had this experience, they'll tell you the same thing. It's very, very real. So when you get sort of, these people spoke to me about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, this stuff's real, and let me tell you more about it." And then and this was all scientific. These people were scientists, right, of the highest order, and associated with government and defense contractors. So now it wasn't until later on that I sort of pieced together, and I really don't want to get into that at all, about how I learned about the real program, the backbone program that's been going on for quite a while.
And just say,
look, there's more to this. Okay, go check it out. There's a lot of information in this interview. I highly recommend you go check out the full thing. I don't want to spoil it all here. There's a lot to talk about. I could have made a lot of videos out of this one interview, to be honest with you. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to unpack about what Jim's saying. I would love to get him on the podcast and discuss this a lot more, to be honest with you. Because I'm just so curious with people who are so sure of what the truth is. Right? That is curious to me. Because I have seen no evidence. I've heard compelling stories, but I've seen no, I guess, physical evidence. Something I could show to someone else and they could experience it like I do. Right? That type of evidence. So this is it's just a lot to take in. Right? As always. But Jim Semivan is interesting. And the fact that there is this sort of secret group that's being studied, they're having these meetings and CIA offices explain, oh, it's this type of being you spoke with. And that we have an agreement, that is terrifying. And at the same time, we don't even know if they reason. Why even make an agreement with them? Was it a forced agreement, meaning, well, we'll just kill you? Again, if they think of us as microbial life, like, what does that even matter? Like, why would they even question, like, you're in power? You're not in power. I'm in power. What's the difference between you and these people over here, right? Like, how would they even see a difference between us? And they would just take over the planet. I mean, just take it over. What's the point? Well, what does it even matter? I don't know. I mean, a lot of questions, y'all. Lots of questions. So, what do y'all think? We'll see you guys on tomorrow's video. Got some great interviews coming up in the next couple days, so stay tuned for those. Steve Bassett and Daniel Sheehan. Those should be awesome. And I will ask about this. All right, y'all. See you guys on tomorrow's video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.